Hi Panthers! We are taking a look at, again, section 1212, which is multi-step equations. So far we've done two-step equations. We've done two-step equations with integers. We've done them with fractions, decimals, and we took a look at story problems. We have done multi-step equations with combining like terms. We've done that for 2 days. And we are going to continue with 12.2, again, combining like terms, except today we're going to look at a little bit of a different type of problem, and these are going to involve algebraic fractions. Okay, algebraic fractions. And again, it's just kind of a multi-step equation that we're going to be looking at. It obviously involves some algebra setup that looks like a fraction. So again, no new lesson here today. We're just going to be looking at a different type of problem. So if you could make sure you have your note packet in front of you, your pencil, perhaps a highlighter, and your calculator. Again, make sure you have your calculator, and let's go ahead and take a look at this. So again, number one, here's what you're going to do. Obviously, since we're going to be looking at a fraction today, you're going to have a numerator and denominator. And the first thing that I'm going to ask you to do is, since you have a denominator, and again, remember with fractions, if you have a denominator, it's the same thing as dividing by that number. I'm going to ask you to do the inverse, which would be to multiply. So we're going to multiply first whatever our denominator is in our fraction to get that out of the way. And then you're going to follow your two-step equation steps. Inverse of any addition or subtraction first, followed by the inverse of multiplying and dividing, and as always, make sure you are double checking your answers. If you are double checking your answers, you know that 100% is guaranteed. Okay, so please make sure that you are doing that. Let's take a look. Letter A, we have 2x plus 7 over 3 equals 4. So this is an algebraic expression, or fraction. Again, we have algebra, we have our variable there, and it's set up as a fraction. We have this numerator here, and we have this denominator here. And our numerator looks a little bit different than what we're used to, but doesn't change anything. Now, typically with our two-step equations, we had said you always do the inverse of addition or subtraction first before multiplication or division. And in this case, when you're looking at a fraction, the rules change a little bit. What I want you to think about is, this is kind of one piece of our equation, and this is one piece. And, easiest thing when you're looking at solving equations, what's the easiest thing to get rid of? So since we have a lot going on in our numerator, the easiest thing this time is to just get rid of our denominator. So that's, again, when you are working with algebraic fractions. Again, I'm not asking you at this point to get rid of that 7 first, because that's, adding 7. Let's get rid of the denominators first. So again, we recognize that our denominator is 3, so it means, again, fraction is the same thing as dividing, so we're dividing it by 3, and therefore the opposite or inverse of that would be to multiply by 3. And I should actually, let me write this up here. When I multiply this by 3, again, it kind of looks like this. They cancel each other out. And remember, if I multiply one side by 3, I must multiply the other. So now I have canceled out my denominator, and I'm left with 2x plus 7, and then 4 times 3 is 12. And I follow my two-step equations now. Okay, steps. So x is being multiplied by 2, and we're adding 7 to it. Recall, we do the inverse of adding and subtracting first. So I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. My inverse operations cancel out, and I'm left with 2x equals 5. Again, that's not my answer. I really want to know what x is. So x is being multiplied by 2, so I'm going to divide both sides by 2. They cancel out, and we are left with, depending on most of your calculators are probably going to give you 2 5/10, or I would prefer at this point, let's keep it in decimal format, but this is also obviously the same thing, 2 1/2, if you're to do a fraction. Now what I would like you to do, Panthers, is take your 2 5/10, type in your calculator, and here's where you're going to need parentheses, because again, this is your numerator. Even though there's a lot going on there, this is kind of one solid piece here. So when you're typing in your numerator, please make sure you're using parentheses, otherwise you will get the wrong answer. But in parentheses, put 2 times 2 1/2, or 2.5, plus 7, close your parentheses, and then divide by 3. And you should get 4. Okay? Let's take a look at another one. Letter B, we have 4b minus 12, and this is, again, this is one group here, and this group is being divided by 6. Okay? So again, our first step here is to eliminate. Let's get rid of our denominator. Again, since it is a denominator, it means that we are dividing by 6, and therefore the inverse of that would be to multiply by 6. And so if I multiply this side by 6, I'm also going to multiply the right side by 6, and therefore I cancel out my 6's. And now I'm left with 4b minus 12 equals 36. And we use our two-step equations. I do the inverse of subtraction first, which would be to add. And if I do it to one side, I do it to the other. And I'm left with 4b equals 48. And b is being multiplied by 4, so I am going to divide by 4. And I get b equals 12. Okay. Again, take that, plug that back up into your original equation. Again, make sure you're using your parentheses. You do 4 times 12, which is 48, minus 12, which is 36. Close your parentheses and do 36 divided by 6, and you get an answer of 6. Let's try one with decimals. Okay, same steps. Understand that we have an algebraic fraction here, and this 1 2/10 is kind of off on its own, so let's get rid of that first, keeping in mind that this is a group and this is, its own group. So again, my fraction bar is the same thing as a division sign. Since we are dividing by 1 2/10, we are going to multiply by 1 2/10. And if I do it to one side, I'm going to do it to the other. Okay, now again, you can use your calculators on this, so please make sure that you are. If you aren't using a calculator, again, we have been working on this for a couple months now, so you can certainly add, subtract, multiply, and divide with decimals. So let's take a look what we have left over. We have 3 2/10 multiplied by k, plus 1 6/10, and over here, if you were to type in 5 2/10 times 1 2/10, you would get 6 24 hundredths. Okay. So our two-step equations, k is being multiplied by 3 2/10, and we're also adding 1 6/10 to that. So the inverse of addition and subtraction comes first. Again, for those of you who are not using a calculator, remember your decimals need to be lined up for addition and subtraction. You're left with 3 2/10 times k, and 6 24 hundredths minus 1 6/10 is 4 64 hundredths. Okay. And again, k is being multiplied by 3 2/10, so we need to divide both sides by 3 2/10. Okay, cancel out, and we finally get an answer of 1 45 hundredths. You can take that, plug it back into the original equation. In parentheses, put 3 2/10 times 1 45 hundredths plus 1 6/10. close your parentheses and divide that by 1 2/10 and see if you get 5 2/10. Let's take a look at a story problem. This is a great story problem, something that applies to each and every one of you at the moment, and it has to deal with figuring out your grades and how well you need to do in order to achieve a certain grade that you want. So let's take a look. James has taken 3 social studies tests and scored 78, 86, and 88. What score does he need to make on the 4th test to have an overall average of 88? Okay, let's go right to the question. What score, okay, does he need to make on the 4th test to have an overall average of 88? Okay. Let's talk about average. I know many of you are very familiar with how to find the average, but some of you may not be. So let's just stop and think about how do you find the average. And you may want to write this on your paper. To find the average of something, you have to take the total or the sum of everything. Okay, you would add up all of the test scores and you would divide by the quantity or the number of tests that you are actually adding in your numerator. Okay, so you add everything up and you divide by that number. So let's set this problem up. So again, we're going to take the total of each of the tests. The first test, he got a 78, plus the second test, which is an 86, plus the third test, which was an 88. Now, what James wants to know is what does he need to score on the 4th test? Do I know what the 4th test is? I don't. So I was gonna put a T, but it kind of looks like my addition sign. So I am just going to I'll put F for 4th test. Okay. So we have our first test, our second test, our third test, and our 4th test. And to find the average of these, how many tests are we talking about? What's the quantity? I'm talking about 4 total tests. Again, I was finding the sum of 4 different tests here. And then since he wants his overall average to be 88, we want to make this equal to 88. So Panthers, you can do this. You can take a look at your current test scores. Let's say you have one last test score for one of your classes, or you're in high school and you have one, your last test is your final exam. What do I have to get an A, or what do I have to get a B in the class? This is very applicable to you. So let's make sure we do a good job on this problem, and if you have any questions about it, please make sure you ask. So, taking a look at this, obviously just right off the bat, let's get rid of our denominator. Okay, so again, this division problem, again, this fraction bar is the same as the division sign, so we're dividing by 4, so let's multiply both sides by 4. And then we're left with 78 plus 86 plus 88 plus F, and 88 times 4 is 352. Okay, and so now hopefully you're maybe looking and saying, well, I could kind of combine a couple of these things. None of these test scores have variables attached to them, so we could go ahead and tally these. 78 plus 86 plus 88 is 252. So we have 252 plus F equals 352. And again, we want to get F alone, so this 252 is a positive amount, so I am going to go ahead and subtract 252 from both sides, and I'm left with F equals 100. So James has his work cut out for him. If he's been scoring 78, 86, and 88, he really needs to study.